I'm a qualified ASA, American Society of Appraisers appraiser, qualified by the IRS to do estates and all other forms of appraisals. So if you don't mind, I'll start the screen sharing and we'll just get right into this subject, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So let's give her a go.
Good.
Okay, has everybody got my screen up on? Can you see the opening slide?
No.
Not yet.
Unless it's on another. Are you going to replace that with your screenshots?
Yeah, am I not doing that?
No.
No.
Let me go back.
You have to
then.
share the screen.
If you're on multiple monitors, you'll probably have to pull it over to the one monitor.
Yeah, I am.
There you go.
There it goes.
There, you got it?
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, now how are we doing? We
Got
good?
it.
Looks good.
What I've done is updated my slides from previous presentations. So those of you who have seen this before will have seen some of this information, but we're going to work real hard to make sure you understand current values. And then we're going to work real hard to make sure we understand how current values may or may not affect you personally. We'll talk specifically about insurance and the three types and et cetera, et cetera. So rather than to bore into any other issues, let's just move right along. You're all very familiar, just as familiar as I am, that vintage trailer demand exceeds supply. Repair costs are sky high, actually. New trailers and RVs are increasing in price based on the current demand for RVs, the COVID effect. All of these issues have, as you'll see in the charts in a few minutes, have made a dramatic increase in the values of our existing trailers and the values of whatever may occur if you're looking at buying another one. There are several real important issues that I find most people don't clearly understand, and I hope today I can leave you with a clearer understanding of insurance. I'm not in the insurance business in any way, shape, or form. In fact, normally I'm on the other side working with individual clients versus the insurance companies. So I think it might be interesting to talk about that for a few minutes. What causes a total loss to one of your trailers, and those are pretty clear, pretty clear why that occurs. There are other reasons for an appraisal or knowing current value, financing, refinancing. As a matter of fact, the values of vintage trailers are increasing so dramatically. There's quite a bit of financing going on in the vintage trailer world that wasn't there a few years ago. And then there's legal reasons. Insured value after a customization or restoration. There are, every day I work on 15 to 20 Airstreams a month. And every day, practically, somebody is finishing a restoration, they're finishing a customization, and the insurance companies typically have no idea what to do with that. And the appraisal process is what comes into play to get a properly valued trailer. And of course, with all of our vintage trailers, there isn't really an NADA that's worth looking at. Some of the newer trailers, the NADA is starting to make more sense, but in the recent past, it's been horribly inaccurate. Again, the insured value. Why are you worried about insured value? Well, as we go into the three different types of insurance in a minute, I'll explain why you should be worried about the insured value. Insurance companies typically most insurance companies use two different types of policies. They use a tow behind policy, or they will use a separate standalone policy. If you were to call your insurance agent up today and say, I've just purchased this 1965 Overlander and I want to get it insured, the insurance agent would say, well, what do you think it's worth? And you would say $70,000. The insurance agent would say, fine, we've got it tied to your pickup truck. And we'll put it in at a $70,000 value. Basically, that little process I just went through is almost useless. It theoretically only insured when it's hooked up to the tow butt, when it's hooked up to the tow truck. They may offer you a standalone policy, but therein lies the value issue, meaning that they'll use an actual cash value at the time of an incident. It's not an agreed upon number, even though that policy may say $70,000. If you read the fine print, it'll say fair market value or actual cash value. Then there's the third type of policy, which of course I try to push all of my clients towards, and that's an agreed value policy. With our trailer values increasing so dramatically, an agreed value policy is really the only way, it's really the only way you can provide adequate and feel comfortable that there's a contract in place that stipulates the value of your trailer. If you have an agreed value policy and it's a total loss, then that means that a total loss they're going to pay on the agreed value. Let's just say it's using the $70,000 example. If the repair costs are anything close to 60% of the agreed value, they're going to write a check for the agreed value amount plus tax and license. So we'll go into this a little more detail yet. We're not done with the three different types of policies. Total loss value is, of course, going to always be the number that is going to say 65%, whatever 65% is of a $70,000 trailer. Heck, let's use a $100,000 trailer so I can make the math easier. 65% is going to be $65,000. So if the repair costs are anything close to that, they're going to total it. And if you have an actual cash value policy, they're going to use their adjuster, the insurance company's adjuster. They're going to hire an outside appraiser who won't know anything about Airstreams. And they're going to come up with a fair market value of something significantly less than your $100,000 trailer. And then you're going to hire me and I'll come step in and try to bring them back to reality about the current values. And I normally prevail, but you never know. The best way to handle this issue is, if you're going to have a total loss, is to have a pre-agreed value policy, meaning that there's an agreed value, contracted value by your insurance company that the trailer's value is $100,000. Let's move on.
Okay.
You know, yes. Was there a question there? Okay.
No.
Okay, let's move on. You know, the transferring of ownership these days is getting increasingly more interesting with phone calls I get each day. The values are moving so quickly. An owner who thought their $70,000 Overlander was worth 50 a year ago is probably really worth 70 today. And somebody who's not immensely familiar with the market isn't going to necessarily know how fast the market has moved. And if there's a need for my involvement, I get involved. I do a lot of consulting at no charge every day for people who are either purchasing or selling. And it's really important to stay on top of this fast moving market we have. Banks contact me pretty regularly for loan values of vintage trailers. More often than not, the loan value contact from a bank will be for a 2006 Airstream 30-foot Classic, just to use that as an example. And the loan value will be typically about 80% of the actual or fair market value. And they're looking at what the current values are. The owner or the person who's attempting to get the loan, of course, is pretty familiar with the market because they just bought the trailer or they're about to buy the trailer. And the banks are they're struggling trying to keep up. How do we identify? Let me just spend a minute or two talking about the identification of the groups of trailers you're going to see in a minute on values. Let's talk about the coup de grace of all trailers. That's the restored custom frame off restoration with basically everything new and a custom interior. So it would have, there wouldn't be anything except the original shell. Probably got a new frame built under it, which is easier these days than the refurbishing the old frame. Let's talk about a number 2 category, which would be an original restoration, frame refurbished, new axles, new skin where needed, floor rebuilt, replaced, some original style interior perhaps, but maybe the exterior is painted and polished. It looks like new. Category number 3, an original partial restoration, frame reconditioned, new axle brakes, restored interior, exterior polish, similar to the original, but not quite as up to the standards of number 2. And then the original repaired, usable, good skin, good interior, working windows, and the original roadworthy, currently used as a camping trailer, but missing parts. It's had a lot of odd restoration done to it. An example of a number 1 trailer would be a 54 Flying Cloud that met all the criteria that I just described. And there's the new value range on that type of a rig. The number 2 that I just described, remember, it has a lot, and the interior looks and smells new. It just didn't have quite as an extensive wiring, maybe perhaps done, or new chassis built. There's the value. There's the value range. The number 3, the partial restoration, looks good. Looks good, very usable. Everything works. New value range. Number 4, repaired, a few upgrades. Also works. Everything is camping trailer. You can use it every day if you want. That range has exceeded most other ranges in the amount it's grown up because of the demand for that trailer. That demand now goes right up through the 90s. Used to be that the 90s trailers, the 80s trailers, maybe nobody really cared. Not the case anymore. There's a lot of restorations going on the 80s and 90s trailers. In fact, I have some examples of 2000 trailers that were gutted and rebuilt. So it's an interesting world we're living in. And then the roadworthy, but kind of rough. It's not something you would do a lot of bragging about, but it still works. Some things are falling off inside, and maybe it's got a broken window or 2, and the windows may not latch properly. And then there's the one that probably should never be moved out of the forests. It just so happens that this is the same trailer that I just showed you in the first slide.
Wow.
What's driving prices? Nothing real new here, but fewer remain each year. The American trailer, simpler days, vintage rigs, the Hollywood effect, cost of restoration, COVID, the new way to travel, the cool factor, new trailers. I don't know if anybody's looked at new trailer prices these days. We just happened to be at a dealer, saw Rod and Lisa at the dealership this past weekend. And, if you look at the prices that were on these trailers, they're kind of astounding. I stay on top of them most of the time. The new trailer prices are kind of just gone through the roof. Remember that number 1 category trailer that I showed you. Take a look at, in early 2020, we were all getting hit with COVID. We didn't know what the stock market was going to do. If you were to take these curves and stretch them out a little bit, but unfortunately my Excel didn't work that way, and move into mid-January of 2020, this little curve right here didn't really occur until about June of 2020. It took a few months off post-COVID before this market started changing. And as I was looking at comps every day for appraisals, I saw the values start ratcheting up on these 50s type of trailers. And then a couple of trailers hit the auction market. and sold for 150,000+. And, you know, they weren't anything more than that trailer you saw in the number one slide. And that's continued right on through early 22. We've got really good comparable data. This 135,000 is a little bit conservative because I have a couple that have hit market recently at 160, 165,000 sold, which means those numbers may be a bit conservative. And the next time you see them, you may see them even higher. The 58 to 69 with upgrades are restored. This is essentially a compilation of the category 2 and the category 3 that you saw a few minutes ago. The critical thing here, can you all see my pointer when I'm using it on the slide?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, all right. The critical thing to see here is this value range from the 60 to the 80. That's what's occurred in the past 18 months or so. You know, if we get an economic downturn or an economic turnaround, this may level off. But when I was appraising back in 07 and 08, you see here that in January of 08, we were in the middle of an economic meltdown. We didn't see our Airstream values decline dramatically. I don't see our Airstream values declining dramatically if we have a correction in our economy in the next 6 to 18 months. The 70 to 90 trailer I find quite interesting. Again, these numbers are quite conservative. The 70 to 90 trailer, again, a few years back or maybe a decade or so, not all that much interest in them. That certainly has turned around. There a couple of restorers contacted me over the past couple of months, at least 2. I think it's been more like 3 or 4, and said, where can we go to find raw material that will work well for building, restoring spec trailers? And they were looking in this 80 to 90 year range. Thinking they couldn't really find a 70s trailer any longer. Well, generally, that's true for a reasonable enough price to allow them to put a lot of money into it and expect profits. There are a few of those restorers that are buying them up like hotcakes. Every time they find a $15,000 1990 trailer, they snap it up. A few are showing up at auctions and so forth. Something with a good body, something with a good sheet metal, that's really all they're looking for. Nothing new here, and you're all as familiar with this as I am. You know, the most desirable, if you can still find one, of course, would be a wee wind, a bubble clipper. The 50s, 13-panel whale's tail trailers. They attract very high auction prices. The $165,000 auction at the sold trailer at Barrett Jackson in January of 22, January of this year, sold for $165,000, was a 1955 13-panel whale's tail trailer with a lot of very high-end interior in it. I see projected values demand driven. I see the iconic Made in America coming back to life even more so than in the past. I see restoration costs increasing. A lot of foreign interest is still occurring, and I hate it, but many of our trailers are moving overseas. I see the vintage trailer hobby still growing because driven partly by the new camping and the new travel hobbies. And demand continues to exceed supply. Let's go back to insurance for just a minute. I'm sure there are a few people on this call. I never ask people to raise their hands, but I'm sure there are a few people on this call that have tow behind policies. And I'd be happy to work with any of you to describe the difference and why you should not have a tow behind policy. And the standalone policy for fair market value is okay. It's better than the tow behind policy. The best for all of our vintage trailers anything that's considered to be vintage. The best to have is an agreed value policy. And there are a number of companies around that will do that. So let's make sure that I leave you with that. And I'm sure there'll be a few questions come up over that in a few minutes, and we will then get into it in more detail. Just also make sure that of course I'm tooting my own horn, but I would like to make sure that if you are going to use an appraiser, make sure you've asked them to see their credentials. I enjoy a lot when the insurance companies hire an appraiser and there's a one-page appraisal that I see and it doesn't have credentials attached to it. It's a lot of fun for me because if it goes to arbitration, the arbitrator basically will just throw it out. And it may be an Airstream dealer that makes out the one-page appraisal, maybe an RV dealer, or it may just be a person that's hung a shingle up to say, I am an appraiser. Just make sure you've checked on credentials. Okay, that's it for me. I'd like to open this up for questions. I hope I didn't take longer than my 20 minutes, a little, I guess, but I'd like to open this up for questions and then we can get into more detail if you would like. I'm going to leave these slides up for just a minute because I think we'll be asked to go back.
Hey, Jim, one quick question. Is Haggerty, has they got into the trailer insured market?
Yeah, the Haggerty has gotten into the vintage trailer market, yes. And if you have a pretty straightforward, let's say of those charts I was showing you a minute ago, let's just say it's a number 3 with partial restoration, and let's say it's a mid-60s Overlander, and you say it's worth $70,000. They'll balk and they'll say, well, you need to get an appraisal. If you say it's worth $50,000, they'll probably say, okay. The point I'm making here is Haggerty does do insurance now. They do not require an appraisal in most cases. But personally, I wouldn't really want the insurance company to determine what the value of my trailer was. So it needs to you need to have some thought, put some thought into it before you use Haggerty. But in, the canned hams, the $18,000 trailer, the $22,000 trailer, they've all shifted to Haggerty. I don't see those anymore in the appraisal business. That's where they're all going.
We
A
gave
lot
our,
of the Airstreams are being kicked back from Haggerty and asked, the owners are being asked for appraisals.
yeah, when we did our, you did ours back in 2018, the update on that one, I think, I provided the appraisal to our insurance company and they were good with it.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, so I didn't want to say, okay, put the file, the appraisal in the drawer, and then
Yeah.
when something happens, then bring it out. So I wanted them to have a copy of it. And so they have the appraisal.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Smart move. That's right.
We ran into a problem with Haggerty. They agreed to insure my 1965 Globetrotter that's had frame off reconstruction. They agreed to insure it, but then when they discovered that we did not have covered and enclosed storage, that someone would be able to see it, they refused to insure it.
Right.
So we went to Foremost.
You have to be careful with the restrictions on Haggerty. It's no different than the restrictions they have on their classic cars that they appraise. You have to read very carefully what the restrictions are. And once you've read those, if you can comply with the restrictions, then you're good to go.
Inside there.
Will say that Haggerty insurance is very cheap.
Excuse me?
I will say that Haggerty insurance is very cheap.
It is.
Inexpensive per year.
Oh,
But we noticed when we had a car insured at Haggerty, our insurance went up some because not all cars are insured. So there was some additional costs that they charged us, but I thought it was still a better deal to have our car insured by Haggerty. And you have to have a separate garage. Like our trailer now is stored inside. And I think that helps a lot as well.
Yeah, it does. It makes a difference. Other
My
questions?
question is, if you have the appraisal and it was appraised 2 years ago and the market's up, is there a percentage that it's worth now that it has to be reappraised?
I just worked on a late 60s Globetrotter today from 18 to 22 was up about 25%.
So is that the average?
I would guess you're about, I did one yesterday that was about a year old and it was up about 10%. So you're thinking back a year old, that's 21. The market was already moving rapidly. So the appraisals were based on current comps. So about 10% to 22. If it's earlier than 21, maybe a 20 or a 19 appraisal, it's going to be up probably about 20%. If there's been any improvements done, then that gives it another factor too.
Okay, so do we need to have to reappraise then?
That makes the most sense. Yes, I do updates at a reduced cost. So it depends on how old it is. It depends on how much the cost will be reduced. But I do updates at reduced cost if I have it in my database.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jim, this is Rodney again, and we'll probably have you redo ours again. We've done a
Okay.
few things, but we want to get it redone because it's been, I don't know, 4 years, 3.5 years. So it's probably
Yeah,
time.
18 was the last time I did that one, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we probably have to
that's
get
up
ours
to
up done
Nick.
also.
Seeing as how it's kind of in that category of the number one, you can kind of get a rough idea of where that's going to go.
Yeah, I don't see you any, first of all, do we have any, are we gonna have access to these slides?
You know, I'm real careful about how I give people access, but if you contact me via email, I'd be happy to sort out, say, 3 or 4 of the slides and give them to you.
And I don't see-
Whichever ones that are important to you, send me an email.
Yeah, I don't see too many argosies on here, so.
Now, there's, I do a lot of, I appraise a lot, I appraise a lot of argosies, but no, I just with Airstreams.
But is the market for the argosies in the same
Very
category?
similar. Yep. You'd find for a well-done argosy, the market changes from 19, 20, and 21 would track those slides very, 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 that slide, that would be your value range increase. Maybe the value started a little lower, but the amount of increase would be about the same.
Which is 10 to 20%.
Yeah, 10 to 20%. Yeah.
My wife will be happy. Thank you very much.
Jim, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a 99 Classic. We have an agreed value policy with Foremost. And so 6 months of the year, the trailer is stored indoors inside our pole barn here during the winter. And the other 6 months of the year, it's at the trailer is on a seasonal site. And I've always wondered if that would be an issue with where it's being stored. We don't live in it, while it's on the seasonal site, obviously. So it is, but there are other people around. And I just never knew how to approach that with Foremost, say nothing, call them. I was always afraid that they would want to alter my coverage, knowing that the trailer wasn't home all the time. And I don't know if you have any comments to that. Thank
Well,
you.
unless they put a restriction on the days used per year. So if there's no restriction on the use days per year, you're okay. Now, the Foremost policy, you also need to be really careful that it actually says agreed value. I worked with a couple people on Foremost policies, and they thought they had an agreed value policy until they read the fine print. So just be careful. Foremost may be coming around a bit because
I may be misspoken. I may be progressive. It was done through FCIS and with one of your appraisals. So
Probably,
it was probably progressive and not,
probably
yeah.
progressive, yeah.
Yeah, so my bad, sorry. That
That's all right.
old timers disease again, you know.
There've been a couple of cases where Foremost was talking about getting into the agreed value policy business, but they haven't done it yet that I know of.
Okay, I've got a question. I'm just very new into Airstreams, and I bought just this past November, bought a 1958 Pacer. And I did not see that listed on as your models. You know, what is the
Well, it's,
provenance of the Pacer model?
yeah, the Pacer, if you look at the 50, what year Pacer is it?
It's a 58.
Yeah, the 50s category. And I appraise a few Pacers. So trust me, they're very valuable. Their size leads them to be extremely valuable to any of the small traders. You know, the Bambis are catching up with the trade winds these days because the demand for the Bambi, the demand for a Pacer are catching up with the trade winds. The trade winds and the Overlanders used to be the real hot ticket in 60s trailers. Now the Bambis and the other traders are catching up. So smallness is good in value. Smallness is good in value, not necessarily for camping, but good in value.
What kind of percentage would you put on a small trailer versus?
Well, you know, the 20% is conservative on a small trailer.
So 20% more than what?
The 20% is conservative in the past 2 years on a small trailer.
Okay.
Most of the restored Bambis now, a well-restored Bambi, meaning that it's a beautiful piece of work, is up in the 70 to 90 range, where a couple of years ago, that would have clearly been in the high 50s at best. And very few of them were getting over 50. So a Caravelle, Pacer, they're all in that same category.
Okay. Good to know.
So where can we find an appraiser? We're in Oregon. How do you find an appraiser?
You're talking to a pretty good one. I'll do a good job. I'm kidding you. I'm not being smarty. I'm kidding you. Most of my appraisals are done via documents and photos. Well accepted by the industry. Insurance companies accept them. I guarantee acceptance or I refund your fee. So what I would do is you would email me and I would send you a data sheet and you'd fill out the data sheet and send me some interior and exterior photos. The data sheet's going to tell me what you've done to the trailer. If it's still original, great. But if it's had a lot of upgrades done to it, the data sheet will tell me that. And when you do that and send me the photos, I may or may not ask you more questions, but it's widely accepted by the industry without me seeing it personally.
Okay. We have a 76 Argosy.
Oh yeah, happy to help out.
Okay, so we just need to email you and then you can
Yep,
email
just
or send us the information to fill out.
Yep, and I'll initiate the work from my end and show you what I need. The last slide here has my email address on it. There you go.
Yeah,
So
Nancy,
Jim, you're going to be up in Maine also, right?
Yeah, it will be. I plan to do 2 presentations in Maine, one at the back tent, if you'll have me, and then one in the bigger tent for the bigger audience. We're planning to park with VAC this year, so it'd be convenient for if we can do a little. Maybe it's just a talk over cocktails or something, but whatever you would like me to do, I will.
Yeah, that sounds great. We'd be happy to have you, Jim.
Okay.
Do you
I'd
have
like
oh, excuse me.
Sorry, I'd like to ask a question about polished versus not polished trailers and how that's affecting value.
Highly sought after in the market. Polished trailer these days. It's amazing how many of the 90s trailers are being polished. The polished trailer adds at least $5,000 to $7,000 to value. even though it may have cost less than that. It's just perceived by the marketplace as more value. Some people don't like the polished trailer. They prefer the weathered aluminum look or the original look, but okay. But the market says that the polished trailer is $5,000 to $7,000 greater value.
Is that true for a 1955?
1985,
1955?
55.
Yes.
Absolutely, probably a little more.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Polk, are you gonna be at the Cali rally?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Linda and I are the creators of the Cali rally, so yes, we'll be there.
Okay. Well, we'll be there with our 56 Caravaner.
Oh, cool.
And
That's
we
great.
need an appraiser. We got yelled at by the VAC people in Arizona this week that we didn't have the proper insurance, so.
All right. Well,
No
that's good to
problem.
hear. Yeah, we will be, Linda and I are the creators of the Cali rally, and we're on our way there now with several weeks stopover in Palm Springs and other places. But we came all the way out of the East Coast back to the West just for Cali rally this year.
Rough life.
Yeah, it's a rough life. Yeah. How do you like my office? Anything else? Any other questions? Please feel free to email me also if you have other things you would like to ask or discuss. Like I said, I help people out every day, and there's no cost associated with that. Quick counseling or whatever else might happen. I love our community, and so I put a lot of effort into helping out people in our Airstream community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're entirely welcome. Any other questions? Other than that, we'll sign off, huh?
Okay, thank you,
much.
Jim. We
Thank you.
appreciate all the work you've done in the Airstream community over the many years that we've known you, and you've been involved in this, and this is a very important topic. And everybody should have some kind of a stated value on their Airstream and keep it current, because you know how these are going up like he showed. So this is a very important discussion.
Okay, yes.
So that being said, how often should you get it pre-appraised, reevaluated?
Well, it depends on what's going on in the market. That's a good question, but if the market's flat, don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
Attend one of my presentations, or if Lisa will have me back on here every year or so and look at the market and see what's going on. If the market's flat, don't worry about it. But
Well, you praise my Argosy, so
okay.
Richard Espinoza. I have the turquoise and white one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I recall. I don't recall when it was. When
A
was
couple
it?
years ago.
Yeah, it's probably due.
Yeah, great. I'll let my wife know.
All right.
I
Okay. Everybody
guess
all
I
right?
have one
I'm
more.
gonna jump in real quick. I would like to jump in real quick. I bought mine not even a year ago, and James, you did an awesome appraisal for me. The process was made very easy by you. The electronic copy was great because you could do everything electronically, forward it over to whomever needed it. It was solid. I did the research, and Mr. Polk really was amazing throughout the whole thing. And a year later, I look back, and it's very important to have the right insurance on a vintage Airstream, because when things happen, they look at, well, what did you pay for it back in 1964? And that's how they look at the value.
Yeah.
So, thank you, James, for all of your work. It's
Oh, thank you.
very
I
much
really appreciate that.
appreciated.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
And I'll see you up in Maine.
Yeah, you bet. I'll see you all there. I hope to keep it going for many years to come.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.